A few years ago, I gave a client an invoice and he asked me a question that completely stumped me. He said, "Why am I paying as much for a white paper as I am for an SEO blog article?" And I said, well, it's the same people doing the same work. They're just writing in one style versus another. And he said, "Okay, listen, I get that's your business cost, but I would rather pay you a lot more money for strategic content that will move the needle for my business. And frankly, I'm really overpaying for these low value SEO blog articles that don't really lead to conversions." And I said, "Oh, interesting. I never really thought about it that way, but let me get back to you in a few days." So I happened to recollect when I was working in IT and software development, and we had pet servers and cattle servers. And the pet servers were like really special servers that had names. And if anything ever happened to them, it was kind of like, everyone drop what you're doing and go fix the server. It's really important. It has everything to do with our success. But if like a cattle server went down, like if it was just one of 10 nodes in a web server cluster, it was just kind of like, all right, someone will go and replace the one server that went down in the cluster. It's a commodity thing. It can be replaced with the execution of a script. It's not really special. And when I was thinking about that, I realized, oh, that's actually what my client needs, like two different levels of service. One is not that important, like SEO blog articles, and the other is very important, where it's case studies and white papers and these kinds of things. And I realized I need to differentiate my service offering so that I'm offering something high value for my customers and something, I won't say low value, but has some value to their business. And that was the model that I went with. So for the last few years, we have been offering pet content and cattle content. Now, when I say cattle content, like I mentioned, it's things like SEO blog articles, or everyday social media posts, which have like a 24-hour life cycle, or website copy for pages that just don't get a lot of visits. They don't get don't get a lot of clicks on Google search, that kind of thing. And at the time, which was several years ago when AI was like just really early, we thought anything that could be generated by AI is kind of cattle content because it's not special. It's commodity. It can be generated by a script, right? And pet content, on the other hand, is much more substantive and important. It's written to target very special audiences who have money, who make decisions, who have intelligence and can read something with a skeptical eye and sniff out BS. Decision makers, people who are going to say, yeah, we're going to go with this product versus another. And these pieces, these pet content pieces, they're written by skilled writers who understand software and what we're selling and the audience and the pain points that the audience faces. So it's pretty skilled writing to put these pieces together. When we talk about pet content, I'm referring to, like I said, case studies that hypnotize prospects and leads into wanting to buy, white papers that demonstrate authority and expertise in a very niche, in-depth way, bottom of funnel content that really shows the details of how a product or a service works before someone makes a buying decision, battle cards that help explain objections that buyers have and how sales teams can respond to them, competitive analyses that compare one product to another in great detail, sales one-pagers and leave-behinds for conferences, so whoever ends up with these, they end up doing more in-depth research, and things like thought leadership, which could be a series of social media posts with reputational risk, or articles that go to like Fortune magazine and Forbes and have a lot of eyeballs on them, usually more high-level executive type readers. So that's when we really pivoted the whole company from all of our content costs this much to now cattle content and pet content have different costs. And now that the AI tools have gotten so good, we're not just using AI on cattle content, we use it on pet content, but the way that we use AI on the two types of content is really very different. And I'm going to have a video about how we use AI in our whole content production workflow, which is very, very complex. But our content is very technical and very detailed, so it has to be very tightly managed. Now, AI has allowed our cattle content to be produced in 3 hours or less, whereas it used to take like 6 hours to write a good SEO blog article or something like that. Now we can do it in 3 hours. And if we really have a good relationship with the client and we understand their product or services really well, we can do it in like 30, 45 minutes. So AI has significantly helped us with producing cattle content. When it comes to content strategy, you really need to have both cattle content and pet content. You want a blend of both, because cattle content will never land you any deals, but it could get attention and build awareness. And it's important to show that you're just still alive. You're saying things about your industry, about whatever, problems that people are facing that you're helping to solve. So cattle content is really useful for that. Pet content is also super useful because it's the thing that drives the most sales or drives the most people to become leads and prospects. So if I had $5,000 today and I that was my whole budget, I would put it all into pet content, especially if you don't really have pipeline. Like pet content is the way to go, but you don't want to exclusively fall into pet content unless you are super elite and people know who you are already. Even if you have a new company, like you already have a huge following or you have relationships with other elite people. Or if you're a startup, that's another good time to do pet content and really focus on it, especially now that AI is taking up all of the informational top of funnel content opportunities anyway. So you want to get that in-depth content to prospects so that they end up being interested in your business. Cattle content is good at saying, hey, we're alive and well. Pet content is good at saying, hey, we're super deep experts in a particular topic. I want to also caution against going all in one on or the other. You want to have both cattle content and pet content. So what we typically recommend to our clients is somewhere between 4 and 8 cattle pieces per month and 1 and 4 pet pieces per month. Depending on the type of work, we sometimes look at the amount of effort for 1 pet piece as 2 or 3 cattle pieces in a sort of credit system. In an ideal world, I would say you should be publishing 2 cattle pieces per week and then maybe 2 or 4 pet pieces per month. And you have a social content calendar where you're publishing 3 to 5 times a week. And engaging in broader discussions more regularly. In many companies, they make the mistake of only doing cattle content. They don't do it on purpose, just that the marketing teams don't know enough to make the pet content, and working with the developers and technical staff can be really complicated. But you need to have both. Like I said, you want to signal that you've got cattle content that brings new traffic in, but the pet content is really targeted. And the two things can really work together. For example, if you publish a technical white paper, let's say it's 10, 15 pages, and it really resonates with your audience, well, then you can take like the top 3 or 5 key findings from that white paper and publish cattle content about each of those findings. And if that does well, consider interviewing the author or authors of the white paper and turning the video interview into clips that can be shared on social media. You might also consider taking the high-level topics from the white paper and making a one-pager about it. And you give your sales team that one-pager, and then you write an email sequence that helps them reach out to prospects and tells them to go to the landing page to download the white paper. So there's a lot that you can do with both cattle content and pet content when you have a good, robust content strategy. This brings up another effect of doing this. This is where you get the 1 + 1 = 3 type of like synergistic effects of cattle content and pet content. If you can reach someone with a social media post that leads them to a landing page, that leads them to fill in a form and get a white paper, and then they start digging around on your website, you can end up getting a sale without any real effort. The content, that's how it works nowadays. So it's really like leaving a breadcrumb trail for someone to follow and get them really into your universe. I've been producing a lot of content about this whole strategy over at bettersalescontent.com. So I'd recommend going there to watch the videos that we've been making there. or check out the articles on edifycontent.com. Now, if you already have an agency or a freelancer making this type of content for you, and they're not writing a mix of both cattle content and pet content, or they only know how to do cattle content, that should be a red flag for you. Even if it's an internal team, if they're not producing any pet content, that's really not good for your business's health. You're not going to generate a lot of pipeline without pet content. You really need a balance of both. So you can either hire us to help you, or, talk to your vendors and ask them what my client asked. Hey, what are we doing about pet content versus cattle content? Why am I paying so much for things that don't convert? And why aren't we doing enough for the content that does convert? You never know where that conversation is going to go, as it happened with me. I was stumped when I was asked, but it led to great results just a few days later. And years later, it's still paying off for our clients. If you have any questions about this, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email, anthony@edifycontent.com.